Well, you're out at a match or you're practicing. You've got your center fire rifle. You pull the trigger, round goes off. Pull that bolt back, but only that much of your case comes out. And you're sitting there going, what just happened? Hi everyone, it's the 4-gun guy. And 2 matches ago, this happened to someone in our squad. And it's called case head separation. And it's something that we really need to look out for. And there's a couple, actually there's one main reason why it happens, but it also goes back to our reloading process and keeping up to date on how many times we've reloaded a case. So that's what I wanted to talk to you today about. Let's talk about the story, then we'll get into what causes it and how we can look for it, and then what we do when we find it. So if you're ready to go, let's get started. Well, the quick story is, as I said in the intro there, at a match, we're at a stage, gentleman goes up, fires, and my buddy Bobby was actually catching his brass, and when the guy pulled the bolt back, that much of the case came out. He tried to reload another round, which of course he can't, because he's got 3/4 of the case still in the chamber, and my buddy Bobby was saying, you can't reload, you had case head set. No, I don't think I did. He said, yeah, I watched it. And he picked up the piece and he showed it to the gentleman. He said, here it is. So he pulled the rifle offline. I had my cleaning rod with me. So we got that, we put a brush on it and I put it down the muzzle end of the barrel. And sure enough, 3/4 of the rest of the case came out. But then it happened again. And I asked the gentleman, I said, how many times have you fired this brass? This answer surprised me. The answer was, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I mean, how many times have you reloaded this case? Again, the answer was, I don't know. And so, I wasn't a jerk about it or anything, but I said, you might want to consider counting how many times you reloaded these cases. So I showed him my reloading process, because this is with me when I go to a match. It's telling me the lot, I give it a lot number. Just watch my reloading video, you'll see how I do all this. But I know exactly how many times I've reloaded these cases. For example, this batch right here is 8x fired. This batch is 8x fired. So this brass has been fired 8 times. And then I go through my reloading process, mark it down, and when I refire this brass in a match or practice and I put it in another bucket, that tag will read 9x fired. Well, let's talk about what causes case separation, then we'll get into the process because I don't want to get ahead of us. So let's go ahead and talk about what causes case separation. Well, there's already a lot of videos out there, so I'm just going to talk to this in this video. So we've got our case, and remember, when we get new brass and we have our chamber here that someone has reamed for us, someone has reamed this chamber. They've either reamed it to SAMI specs or close to it, depending on what type of specifications you might give them that you're looking for in your chamber. But they've reamed the chamber, we get a new piece of brass, we quote, fire form that brass. So when I get new brass, I do nothing to it, especially the 6BRA stuff from Alpha. This stuff's awesome. I've shot matches with new brass and the rifle's shot great. But what happens is you put this new brass in your chamber, and we've talked about this before in the reloading and in other videos, that brass is going to expand to the chamber. Right? It just is. With all the pressure that's involved in there, you got 55, 60,000 pounds per square inch. It's going to start expanding this brass to your chamber. It fits it to it. Now we get this fired brass, which is what this is. We bring it back to the shop and we want to bump that shoulder back about 1.5 to 2 thousandths of an inch. I generally go 2 thousandths of an inch. That's just to make sure that if we get anything, a speck of sand or a piece of grass or whatever on this thing, that it will still chamber in the rifle and we'll still have a successful firing. Some people don't resize, by the way. Some people don't bump the shoulder back. They leave it as it is, fitted to the chamber. And hey, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. I'm not here to say one way or the other. But the fact of the matter is that if you bump your shoulder back, then the next time you fire it, you have, say, 2 thousandths of an inch of headspace. That means there's a gap between this shoulder, right, and the shoulder of your chamber, of your cut chamber. There's technically 2 thousandths of an inch gap there. Pull the trigger, click, bang. What happens? It expands, and as it expands out, perhaps, yes, because you resized it. I full length size it, so I resized it. And it also expands forward. What you got to realize is that every time you're firing this brass and every time you're resizing the brass, that resizing die is moving brass around to make it fit that die. That's what's happening, right? And we're annealing, but remember, the annealing process stays up here at the shoulder. The annealing process doesn't get down here, right, into like the case head area or lower on the body. It stays up here. That's where we want it. So a lot of this stuff is happening, and if you don't check this for possible separation or the beginning signs of separation, then eventually it's going to catch up to you. Remember, these have a finite number of firings in them. It's not infinite. And we want to make sure that we catch it before we get into the situation that gentleman was in. Now, one other thing I want to talk about is, I've talked to some folks about this, and they agreed, my point was, wait a minute, when that case separates, right, it's separating with 58,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. This case is designed to hold some of that pressure. So when that case separates, it's allowing a lot of that pressure to get out into that chamber, and that's not good for your action, right? It's not good for the action. It's not good for your barrel, because that's where the chamber's cut. It's not good for any of those mechanics. So that's another reason we want to make sure we minimize or hopefully never have case separation. Now, let's get into not what causes this, but how can we detect it? How should we, just some tips to detect this separation. I saw this first tip in a video a long time ago. I can't even remember where it was, or maybe it was an article, but it's the simplest method to do this. You take a paper clip and you bend it. So let me come over here and see if this is even going to come into view. I'll stand in front of this here. And you bend it so you have this little bend in it up here. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it in here, and I'm just going to run this up and down the inside, the body of the case. And what I'm looking for is just a little catch. Just a little catch down around here that's just like above the webbing. It's between the web of the case and the beginning, if you would, of the body of the case. But it's running this in here, and I'll take about 10 cases while I reload. And I really should put this in my process. I haven't put it in there, and I don't know why, but I'll take about 10 cases and I'll do this. The other thing that you can see is you can visually start to see. Now, these cases don't have any issues, so you won't see it. But on the outside of the case, right about, let's say this is a 6BRA, so it might start about 1/4 inch up from the base, from the head, you may start to see a little ring starting to form on the case. And that's probably, if you see that ring, when you do this test, you'll feel that indentation in there because the case is in early stages or mid stages, late stages of separation. Okay, and then the final thing that we can do, which I do, and I recorded it for this video, is I use my bore scope. So I can take my bore scope, I can take a case, put this in there, and look around. Let's take a look at that real quick, and let's see what that looks like. Okay, so I've got a little fuzz on my bore scope, but you can see here that as I'm coming up and down the case, I'm looking for that little indentation or line inside. You can see the flash hole there at the bottom, but I don't see any indication of that. Now this is fired brass, right? This just came off the line from a match yesterday. So you could actually, I'll pause this here so we can see it. You could actually, some of that could be being covered up by the spent powder in here. That's why I use this method first, right? This method, you'll scrape away any powder that's in there, and it looks like there's a lot in there. There's really not. When I pull this out, there's nothing on this thing. So it's just that. But this is the best thing to use to get some initial indications of case separation. So I just wanted to show you that aspect of it, two ways that we can really look for that. One last topic I wanted to touch on was the fact that if you remember the reloading process I follow, when I'm resizing my brass after firing, I am using my comparator, my headspace comparator, every single time. Please, please, please use this comparator on every firing, every time you fire the brass. In fact, it's a really cool thing to watch because you'll take your first measurement of new brass and you'll go, okay, and I'm not bumping it, I fire it. Then I get my second brass. I measure it, but save that initial measurement. Third firing, do the same thing. Fourth firing, you'll start to see everything start to just level out because it's finally formed to your chamber and you're finally sizing it down properly so it can reform to that chamber every firing. And once you find that, then you're good to go. I still use this every single time I fire this brass. Every time, guys, please use these instruments. Don't just put this up after 3 firings and say, I don't need to measure anything anymore. You should be measuring every single time. This is about 120 cases. I'll probably take measurements on 20 of them as I resize, just to make sure that everything is staying the way it is. And that would give you an idea that if you did make that mistake on that very first piece of brass and you over bump it because it has grown, then you can make the adjustment and you've only lost 1 piece of brass. Well, hopefully this was a kind of a shortish video. Final thoughts here. Look, we're talking about case head separation. I saw it firsthand in a match 2 matches ago. I asked the gentleman how many times he's reloaded those cases, couldn't tell me. You should be able to tell anybody how many times you've reloaded this case. This case, I could tell you, it's been fired 8 times, okay? And then we talked about the manual method with the paper clip to try to just check for the beginning of case head separation, and using the bore scope to even check even further for that. I talked about the fact that you really need to use your instruments on every reloading session, right? Don't just hang them up. Keep reusing them. And finally, please find some type of a process to go by, right? And I've told people before watching my videos, I'm happy to send this to you. I've probably sent this thing to 50 people who've asked me for these documents. Happy to send this to you. You can adjust it however you want to adjust it. So I hope this was a little informational for you, and it's just something, again, for us or for you new reloaders that I've been talking to a lot lately, to think about, right? There's a lot to think about in this, and a lot that goes beyond the equipment that we're buying and using. So, got a lot more coming up. I want to thank you for tuning in again. Thanks for all the subscriptions, the likes, the comments. I really do appreciate it, guys. And until next time, shoot straight.